Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 34th episode of Toaster Talk on the Toast Network. It's been a crazy year so far, but this weekend's racing has probably left a lot of people underwhelmed. But we'll try to see the bright spots from this weekend after RB rallied through or pushed through a 1-2 yet again, the fifth race that they have won this season of the 5 races that have happened this season. But we have our fanelists on today, Sunny and Naren. Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing very well. Although admittedly the race this time, of course, was a bit late for us. So we couldn't watch the race live, but of course the highlights were good enough and here and there.
And how about you, Naren? Better time zone for you at least.
Yes, I was able to at least watch the complete race. And yeah, it was a good race. It was not something that I expected, but a very good race. We can discuss it as we go on.
Yep, I mean, while the race was straight through, some of the highlights are there were no yellow flags, there were no red flags. All drivers, none of the drivers retired, except the last two were lapped down. Everyone actually finished the race. So pretty clean from that perspective, but quick highlights from both of you on what you felt about this racing weekend. We can start with you, Sunny, and then
I would say, maybe Naren, you could go first because you saw the full race, whereas I couldn't.
Okay, I would say it was a predictable top three. But what I really liked was the fierce midfield battle. And if you see yesterday's race was a complete mix. It was a proper shuffle. Many people were going up the ladder. Some people were going down. The same people who went up the ladder also went down a little. So it was a proper mix between in the midfield. And then the last 5 places, it was more or less under the same radar of who was and who was not. But then I had my own inhibitions on why some things did not happen the way it should be. But yeah, it was a pretty eventful race, and yeah, I liked it.
I mean, one thing to highlight for the race start was the qualifying itself was pretty much a mixed bag. You had Hamilton who didn't make it to Q3. You had, Max Verstappen who screwed up the first run, so he didn't get any time on the board. And then when he went out for the second one, Charles Leclerc crashed out, which meant he didn't get anything on the board and he was ninth. Obviously, the results say a different story, but that just highlights his journey from ninth to first effortlessly. I mean, like seriously, effortlessly how he managed to go up there. But I think the qualifying was a mixed bag, and that showed us some of the shuffling that Naren's speaking about throughout the race. Sunny,
and interestingly, K-Mag was P4.
Yeah, even he was surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sunny, your thoughts?
Yeah, so just to pick up on your thoughts on how Verstappen effortlessly sliced through the field. If you remember, post the qualifying session, Alonso was asked, by when do you expect Verstappen to be on your rear tail, on your rear wing? It's not a question of if, it's a question of by when, right? And interestingly, and Alonso has been asked this question before, and he is known for giving very accurate predictions. So much so that it almost looks like Fernando Alonso's got this kind of crystal ball soothsayer kind of aura about him. But jokes apart, so Alonso predicted lap 25 is when Verstappen will be just behind or even ahead, and it turned out that Verstappen was ahead of Alonso by the lap 15, I believe it was.
Yeah, he said lap 15, and he at the end of lap 14 he went and overtook him.
Okay, yeah. So
actually, he said lap
just goes
25,
to show that.
Yeah, go on.
It was lap 14 or 15. Yes. Yeah. So, but one interesting thing about the qualifying session was, as you said, it was quite a mixed up grid this time. And because of that, I think we got interesting rates. Of course, I only saw the highlights, so maybe that makes it look like it's more interesting. But if a grid like that can't produce an exciting race, then I don't know what's going to produce an exciting race.
Well, I'd say the prior races did, and I think whatever said and done, red flags tend to, or even yellow flags or safety cars for that aspect, bring in a change in strategy because they add in an unknown variable, which teams then have to play out too, which does tend to get a lot more excitement in. What we aren't seeing this time is, at least for your first two places, they're just blowing apart all opposition that's out of the way. RB's really figured out the car this time, and they're able to push. And I think the only excitement we are seeing there is RB1 fighting with RB2. We know which side the constructor is supporting, which seemed to be the case even in this race. But I think what's more exciting is in the constructors at the second place, we've got Aston Martin, all thanks to Alonso. Yes, Stroll's been adding the points too, but Alonso's been a consistent podium finisher at number 3 this season. And that's putting in a lot of points for Aston Martin to be at second place, followed by Mercedes at third. And Ferrari is somehow hanging around at fourth right now. Sunny, I know you wanted to chime in over there.
So we know the pecking order after the Red Bull Racing team. We don't really know who's the second best team at the moment, but I'd like to focus on the best team right now, which is Red Bull Racing, and we're looking forward to this RB1 versus RB2 challenge for the rest of the season. However, after seeing today's race, I think Sergio Perez will be very, very disappointed. He was on pole position. Verstappen was on 9th, and Verstappen still won quite comfortably. I think this is going to be a big dent to Sergio Checo's confidence as well. Yes, of course, professional racing drivers. Who am I to say? I mean, this is Checo that we're talking about. So who am I to talk about Checo's driving ability or driving confidence? But having after being given such a big handicap, I think it's going to definitely be a worry for concern for Checo. And I think going forward, I think without any issues for Max Verstappen, these things will be very difficult for Checo to beat. If you remember, I think we discussed this even in the last podcast. It's only been 4 races. And yes, Checo has won 2 races, but in both of those races, Verstappen had some issue or the other. At least in Jeddah, there was a big issue. Azerbaijan, okay, yes, Perez won it fair and square. But 4 races is too small a sample size to deduce anything. And we can't be talking about a season-long title challenge after just 4 races. And I think this race in Miami has really highlighted that point.
Yep. No, but based on what's happened so far, while it's a small sample set, and hopefully what the next race is in Italy, and we're hoping the other cars have planned upgrades. Hopefully that will shake up and bring in some competition that we haven't seen so far. But Naren, from your perspective, what does the rest of the season look like, or what are the things you are looking forward to for the rest of the season?
I would like to just add on to what Sunny has been already saying. If you see the last 4 races, it started with Max, Checo, Max, Checo. It has been an alternate. I see 2020 Mercedes vibes where it was a constant battle between Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas for the top 2, and they were in a league of their own in 2020. That's something that I see what will probably go the next races to come. What actually interested me is that after the race has completed, during the post-match conference, the post-race conference, sorry, we are all in the IPL thing. So during the post-race conference, I think Jenson Button was the one who was interviewing all the winners, and when he asked Checo, how do you feel after losing this podium or the first place to Max, he did not actually sound frustrated or pressurized. He just said we just gave our best, and in my perspective, will continue to race as I do. This actually shows that Perez has taken off some of the pressure off him by trying to compete against Max. Even if you see in the race around lap 28, when Max was around 1 second behind and he was inching closer to the DRS zone, usually Checho, the race driver he is, tries to defend whoever, even if it is Max. That's what we have seen him do. But today, in the yesterday's race, he did not defend. He let Max go through. That shows that if there is a serious issue with Max, then Checho will probably be on the top. But I think he's happy with the way he is in P2 in the Drivers' Championship. And second thing is that I would like to also see the matured Hamilton try to. He's not pushing aggressively these days. I want to see him push aggressively and pass through like how he did in Brazil last time. Even though he had an engine problem, he went and he won the race. I think that's something that I also would be expecting. So yeah, these are my expectations. Hamilton to drive through and Checo to just be his own.
I mean, on Hamilton, on today's race, my point I wanted to bring up was the change of guard. They actually asked Hammy to let Russell through. I mean, Hammy did say, let him get through. I'm not going to stop for him. But Russell did go by and he didn't really stop him. And what are your thoughts on that? With Russell getting higher finishes this season, is Mercedes sort of now pivoting towards investing more on his success, while Hammy seems to be figuring his way back to that championship mindset that you're talking about? And I'm open to either one of you, whoever wants to take the first stab at this.
Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. So
Go ahead,
yeah.
Naren, please.
If you see the yesterday's race, I think in the mid of the race, in turn 11, is when most of the overtakes of Max Verstappen was happening. I think that is the end of one of the DRS zones, and he was overtaking almost everybody. In the same DRS zone, I was expecting Hamilton to do the same. But what he was doing is at the start of the braking zone, instead of braking ahead, usually they brake at 50 meters or even 40 meters, he was still braking behind the one who's braking, and he was always letting him through. He was doing that for almost 3-4 laps, and behind Kevin Magnussen, he was doing the same. Even though he was just 4 tenths behind K-Mag, he was still not passing through K-Mag. I was thinking whether he will probably, that's what I was saying. I wanted to see more of the aggressive Hamilton he was in the past races. I was for a moment questioning why is he not overtaking, going for the gaps, so to say. Then this is something that's still a question for me. I don't know the answer. It probably in the next races we'll see. This actually chimes the bell with the question that you have asked: is Hamilton taking a step back? Is Russell given the chance? I would say no. They are given still an equal chance, but for some reason, Hamilton is taking a step back, which probably we'll see in the next few races. But in my perspective, both the race drivers are given equal chance, and Russell takes most out of the same opportunity.
I mean, I have a thought on it, but before I get to that, Sunny, anything from your perspective?
So with regards to the machinery and the car setup, I think, yes, Mercedes, in fact, is known famously for their policy, giving both their drivers equal machinery and equal opportunity. So I don't think they're favoring any of their drivers the equipment. However, this is going to be a little difficult to explain because I think George Russell has got an aura of the lead driver. And I don't have any evidence to back this. I don't have any, apart from, of course, the results of Russell Hamilton in the in last year's standings, and even this year is out qualifying Hamilton quite regularly. So in terms of overall aura and even personality, even if you remember the press conference in Australia where they qualified second and third, Russell was on second, Hamilton was on third. Russell was the boss of that conference. The overall vibe that Russell is giving versus the overall vibe that Hamilton is giving us, it's a night and day difference. So although there's no evidence from my side, there's no data, but just looking at the body language, looking at the aura, and looking at the vibe of both of the drivers during the media interactions, and the overall body language of the car as well, how they're driving the car, how they're speaking, it does look like Russell is becoming the boss out there.
Yeah. I mean, he's obviously making the most of the opportunity. I also feel that Hamilton having won 7 times, for him, it's either win or nothing.
Sorry, one point, a very important point I forgot to mention. Hamilton's contract has not been renewed yet. And there are discussions of Hamilton calling it quits at the end of the season. And it does look like that is probably going to happen, because now Mercedes are expecting an upgrade in Imola, but of course, all the other teams will be upgrading as well. So how much are they really going to upgrade? I don't think that it's going to be that much. There are no miracles in Formula One. Could this be Hamilton's last season? If Mercedes can't produce a competitive car and there's no other place to go, I think the chances are good.
Yeah, that basically boils down to what I said. For him, it's win or nothing. Like second, third, fourth doesn't mean anything to him. So from his perspective, he's basically probably experimenting more with the car to see if they can get that winning combination, which means he's okay with coming 6th, 7th right now, but as long as he can experiment more to get that winning formula, because Mr. Dependable George Russell is happy coming in 4th and scoring, points in that range, because he's building his reputation. For Hamilton, it's like, if I'm not world champion, then what am I wasting my time for? So that could be another point. And it goes back to your point that if they can't get that winning car this year, then he's probably just going to call it quits and try something else. Because speaking of which, he's, by the way, an executive producer for a Hollywood movie called Apex, starring Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt's been practicing in an F2 car, which will then be technologically superimposed with an F1 car for the movie. And he might actually be driving down Silverstone for actual clippings for that movie. So Hamilton's clearly already figured out his alternate career.
Yeah, I think this was coming on the news as well, that Brad Pitt will be going around. Also, there was also one news, if I remember it right, that it's obviously a rumor currently, that Charles will replace Hamilton if Hamilton quits this year.
That'd actually be a good move for Charles.
That's still, nothing is concrete, but then this is what I've been hearing a lot in the news recently.
I mean, Charles deserves it. Today's race, he was competing with Haas and he could barely keep up.
That sad part aside.
But he is one of the,
Magnussen raced well now.
Sorry,
from the highlights I saw, it was not a case of, it wasn't a case of Charles unable to get past Magnussen in the Haas. I think it was a case of Magnussen driving very smartly from the highlights that I observed. I think Magnussen was really smart, deploying the energy at the strategic time, allowing Charles to pass at a zone where he would benefit from the next DR zone that is immediately afterwards. So that was very smart from Magnussen, actually.
Yeah, no, but those were the key points where Charles had a chance and Magnussen defended well. But at the end of the, Charles has a much better car, and there were a lot more opportunities where he could have just gone through, which didn't happen. And I think from a highlights perspective, it just captured those key moments where K-Mag did a great job. But honestly, with the car that Charles has, I would have thought he would have blasted past much earlier.
I think the same is the case with Hamilton also. With the if you compare Haas, Ferrari, and Mercedes on the same scale, Haas is probably on the other side of the scale, where Mercedes is on the heavier scale. There was an easier chance for both Charles and Hamilton to pass through Mag, but for some reason they didn't do. Yeah, that's what it is.
Before I call it a wrap, and I know the season is also going to take a break before we hit the May 29th weekend for Italy and everything moves to Europe. While everyone's been highlighting that this has been a boring season so far, an interesting stat that I did notice was, apart from the two newbies of Sargent and De Vries, within 5 races, all other 18 drivers have got at least a point, which just shows how close it is, that everyone's got an opportunity to score points. And hopefully, as we get to the season, this might be one of those seasons where we might see all the drivers with a point, because honestly, De Vries has got points before, so it's not that lack of confidence in that space. And Sargent's probably the only newbie here, but he's got a lot of talent. So I wouldn't be surprised with Williams having got points already with the other car. They could potentially, once he gets his feet into the groove, into the car, he might also end up getting that point. So that's one stat I would be looking forward to see towards the end of the season, if all the drivers get themselves a point.
Probably Sargent should do some trick like Alex Albon of driving in the same set of tires, and probably he will get a point. That's a strategy that only Alex can do, from what I've seen. And also, if you see yesterday's race, Max was even managing his tires really well. For a set of hards that should have been changed at around 30, he was extending, I think, close to 45th lap, and only then he changed to his mediums, which also proves that he's been looking after his tire management skills well. But yeah, for what I was saying is that if Sargent has a knack of driving in the same set of tires, he will probably get a point, even in Imola.
Or he might just become a wet race specialist. That always gives chances for everyone.
Yes, true.
Any final thoughts from your perspective, Sunny, before we wrap up?
No, Vivek. The only thing I can say is this race was clearly the Max Verstappen show. He was the driver of the day as well. Started on 9th. He provided all the overtakes, all the exciting overtakes. Had the fastest car. The car was the star of the show for sure. Red Bull is definitely the RB19 class apart, but he had to overtake Perez, who started on pole, which he did quite convincingly. It's very clear that there was only one driver today to watch.
Totally agree with that. We come to the end of the show today, and then we're going to take a break before we hit the next race end of the month. But once again, thanks to our fanelists, Sunny and Naren, for sharing your thoughts on this race, which was at the oddest hour for our Indian audiences. But people still managed to catch up at the race or through the highlights. And if you have your thoughts, comments, put it up in the comment section. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Hopefully this was an interesting post-match or post-race analysis to get you a groove of what's happening on the racing circuit and what's lined up outside it. With that, thank you everyone, and wishing everyone a good evening.